You've got some muscle that's going to grow there. All right, I'm going to introduce you now, Adrian.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the When at Work podcast. Here with Julian Leahy, and today I'm joined by Adrian Tobey in Niagara Falls, Canada. And Adrian has a fantastic business called Groundhog, and he works with WordPress software and helping businesses scale on WordPress. And I'm a big WordPress fan myself, so I was interested to talk to Adrian. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Now, Adrian, let's get into this first of all. This software business, how did this start? When did you start learning how to work with WordPress?
So it started a long time ago for me, probably around seven or 8 years ago now. I was in university still. I was at the University of Toronto studying computer science. Big surprise. And I was working in the family business, like a lot of us get started and working in the family biz. And my dad's family biz was a digital marketing agency. I was helping other small businesses build new websites, implement marketing automation CRM tools like Infusionsoft, as it was known at the time. And I did that for around 3 years. And during that period of time, I worked with literally hundreds of businesses, built thousands of various marketing campaigns, thousands of web pages, sent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of emails on behalf of our customers, and absolutely generated tens of millions of dollars in that period of time. And throughout that period of time, we identified a number of deficiencies that existed for small businesses that get started with WordPress, which the vast majority of new businesses probably go down that route because it's free. And the barrier to entry is relatively low, and there's lots of like small business plugins that exist in order to accelerate growth. And there was a ton of deficiencies between integrating that aspect of sort of getting started with your digital presence as a business and being able to integrate that with your CRM and marketing automation tool, which if you don't have one of those, it's absolutely necessary. And we'll get into why it's absolutely necessary probably a little bit later. But from those deficiencies, we're like, well, how can we solve those? And we decided to build an equivalent product to something like Salesforce, HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, Infusionsoft within WordPress itself, just as a plugin, so that it would easily integrate with all of the tools small businesses are already using, like WooCommerce or like Lifter LMS or LearnDash or WP Forms, and all of these different tools that small businesses want to use to sort of get their digital presence up and going, and make that easy and translatable into their CRM, where they can then leverage that data to create growth and to create wealth. Obviously, it's a very, very saturated space these days. There's lots of CRM marketing automation tools available to small businesses to choose from. And there's lots of great deals going around, and there's a lot of hype. And when we decided to start this, a question I get asked a lot is, well, how number one, like, were you able to convince people that because WordPress gets a bad rap for a lot of things, like it's slow, or that if you have too many plugins, or that it's unsecure or whatever. And then you add like a fairly like significant piece of the puzzle, CRM and marketing automation on top of that. Like, how do you convince small businesses that having those two things in one place is that a good idea? And number two is like, how do you even build an audience in an already like incredibly saturated market, which is a question I get asked a lot. I work with thousands of businesses now as like the founder of this tech company and delivering software. And we deliver, I think, a lot more than software. We also deliver actionable advice. And it's like, well, if it's already so saturated, how do you build an audience? And especially, how do you do that when you're starting from zero, like we were? Like no previous built-in audience, very little marketing budget. You're bootstrapping your company. It's not like you got $1 million venture capital seed or whatever, or $10 million, whatever. We didn't get that. what do you do? So number one, it's important to understand that there's enough room for everybody. There's always enough business to go around. And step one is to defining who your audience is niching down, right? Someone famous, I'm sure someone said, if you're selling to everybody, you're selling to nobody, right? And there are billions of businesses that could be our customers, but if we like went out and tried to get billions of businesses to be our customers as like this small outfit, right? Those are two things that don't go together. So number one, if you're in your very early stages, you gotta niche down. You have to pick sort of like a general market that you could appeal to, and that your course, your product, your software, if you're selling software, your speaking, your YouTube channel, your whatever, right, appeals to some larger audience. Pick a very small portion of that. So when I started, it was like, well, all businesses can use Groundhog, but that's not exactly like a helpful metric to understand. It's too big of a metric to be able to go out and build a Facebook audience. Like you can't do that. So pick a small section. Well, we're a WordPress plugin, right? So we can automatically then say, all right, well, we're going to take a subsection of all businesses and say just all businesses that use WordPress. Still a very big number. Like WordPress powers like the top 10 million site, or like I think it's 37 or 38% now of the top 10 million sites ranked by traffic. And that's a really big number. So niche down even further till you get around maybe like anywhere from like 50 to 100,000 people. And so who is that audience? Well, for us, that audience is agencies, digital marketing agencies. And from there, we have the starting point of people that we can go out and directly speak to and talk to on their level and create extremely specific copywriting on our website, on our homepage. If you go to our homepage, it says CRM marketing automation for agencies, and agencies is underlined. So that when people
how long did it take you to work out that agencies were who you wanted to
Way
target?
too long. Way too long is the answer to that. I think it must have been a year and a half before, and I didn't even figure it out. Someone told me, and I might take credit for it, but it's not true. So I was very fortunate to meet a lot of incredibly influential and incredibly intelligent people in the WordPress community over the last 3.5 years, and this actually factors into step 2 after niching down. But basically, Chris Badgett, who is the founder and CEO over at Lifter LMS, which is the second largest LMS plugin for WordPress.
Lifter
LMS, learning management system, right? And he recommends that I go to a program, which is like an in-person seminar, which they don't do anymore, which is unfortunate. But a guy from SAS Academy, which was a seminar over in Ottawa, so not too far from where I am, had this full day session of like, well, if you're struggling to grow, which at the time we were, it's like, well, what do you do? And step 1 is niching down. It's like, so pick an audience. And then I kind of went through his exercise and picked subsets of subsets of subsets. And then it's like this eureka moment, agencies, right? It's like this very specific target audience that has sort of like these nodes that go to other audiences. So if I want to branch beyond this like specific audience, I have the ability to do so, right? Just because you pick one audience to directly speak to and directly market to doesn't mean you can't serve others as well at the same time. Right? So marketing directly to agencies also allows us to serve small businesses by default because they're using our product for their customers as well.
They're sort of recommending your products to their own customers if they're
exactly.
using it.
So it's like we're creating like this tree of branches that starts at agencies and then expands outwards and encapsulates more and more audiences as sort of this network. Right. So as you're going through this process of choosing a specific person to to acknowledge and to talk to, think about, well, what other circles could I also serve? And pick the one that's sort of like, imagine like a Venn diagram. Picture the one that kind of like overlaps in other circles. And that's the one that's going to get you the most reach, while at the same time being the most effective at selling to and converting. So that's step one. It took me way too long to realize that and to go through that process. And if you need help going through that process, maybe check out, well, if you're not a SaaS, if you're not like a software company, SaaS Academy is probably not going to be the one for you. But there's absolutely plenty of resources on help online to define your ideal customer if you haven't gone through that process yet. If you haven't, go do it. It is well worth its time. And if you have to spend money to get someone to help you do it, absolutely do it. It's a worthwhile investment. So that's sort of step one. And step two of the process of now building an audience when you don't have any money to do so. And I spent like $3,000. So I'll tell you what doesn't work before I go into this step. What doesn't work is loading up a Facebook custom audience and then spending $3,000 on an ad. That does not work. Because I did that. And I got absolutely zero return on investment for that. So that was basically like I built Groundhog and it's like a span, like by myself. I'm not by myself anymore, thank God. But at that time, I was by myself, as probably many of our listeners are. And I set up a landing page, and then I sent $3,000 worth of Facebook ads traffic to it, and nothing happened. Facebook ads work really well when you already have an audience because there's proof associated with that. There are people to back up any claims that you make. There's reviews. There, you have the ability to do retargeting. You can build like audiences. But basically, I basically built a custom that said like all small businesses, all agencies, all whatever, and it wasn't very niche at the moment. And I set it to like a bunch of different countries. And Infusionsoft, which I used to work with a lot, sells really well in Brazil. So I'm like, okay, I'll throw Brazil into the mix. And then all of my money got spent on people in Brazil who are totally unqualified to like spend the money that I was asking for them to do on the product. And it was just total money wasted. Just out the door. So that doesn't work. After you've picked your target audience, which you should do before spending any money on PPC, but before you even spend money on PPC, you should identify a couple things. Number one, where does that person hang out? Like, what do they do? Where do they spend their time? Do they spend their time, if you're like a brick and mortar company, does your target audience, like let's say you're selling, I mean, supplements is a really popular one. Like it's an easy, low barrier to entry business to get into selling supplements. There's lots of brick and mortar supplement stores. Where do supplement people who take supplements hang out? They hang out at the gym. Where would be a great place to then go like market to people? Well, find your local gym and put something up on the billboard that they have there, the pin board, or contact the manager of said gym and say, hey, listen, can we come to some kind of deal, right? Or if you were, let's say, a music teacher, right? Where do people who require music training hang out? Schools, concert halls, maybe. And then that's where you'd probably want to spend some of your time so you can interact with your target audience online. People who require CRM marketing automation software. Agencies. Where do agencies hang out? They hang out in like agency-specific Facebook groups. They listen to lots of podcasts, right? And so you identify where your target audience is spending their time, and then you go be there. And that's what I did. I'm like, well, at the time I wanted to approach just like I hadn't niched down to agencies yet. So I was like, I just want to target small businesses using WordPress. So what do small businesses using WordPress do? They hang out in Facebook groups and they listen to WordPress-based podcasts. And so I literally just went on Google and I Googled WordPress podcast and I took the first 30 results and I solicited basically 30 podcasts and like 3 people got back to me. Prepare for rejection. It happens. Don't take it personally, right? You're early. It's just the game. You play the game.
We always
And
do a little bit.
pardon?
We
What's that?
always do.
Yeah.
Just for about 20 seconds.
Yeah. And 3 people got back to me, and I did three shows, and they went okay. I feel like I'm a lot better at doing them now, and that's the thing. Like, it's not your first run at doing anything in any sort of community for the first time is going to be a little bit. You're doing it for the first time. It's unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar territory. You haven't built the muscles necessary for sort of doing it perfect every single time. Not that I do. I still don't do it perfect every single time, but I've gotten a lot better. And what that's going to do is that's going to create sort of a flywheel effect. So you're going to have your first go at doing a podcast or consulting with another brick and mortar store or joining a Facebook group and answering people's questions. You're going to have a go at that. And it's going to create a flywheel effect where basically the next step in the grand staircase to audience built is going to essentially just appear before you. So for me, what happened is the third podcast I did in those initial 3 was with a guy named Jonathan Denwood on a podcast called the WB Tonic. And it went really well. It was the best out of the 3 that I did. And then he invited me back onto a show that he calls his Round Table, where he gets like 3 to 5 sort of WordPress influencer types to discuss topics of importance within the WordPress community and the marketing community in general. And on this podcast was another podcaster and another SaaS owner, his name being Chris Badgett, who I spoke briefly about earlier, who then invited me on his podcast. And then another podcaster watched his podcast, like, that'd be a great guest for my show, and then get invited to that one. And then it creates sort of this snowball effect where at each step of the way, if you deliver valuable content and you help people get results and you're open and honest, the people that need to recognize that in order to help you move forward are going to recognize that, because the thing about podcasts is that they need guests, right? People need guests, and if you're a great guest, guess what? You'll do okay. Like, if people now we have like, we're on Matchmaker, and it used to be that I'd have Nancy reach out to people to book guests, and now I'm the one who gets solicited because people need guests, right? And it creates this flywheel effect, and that's what's going to help you begin to build an audience. Now, when you're doing podcasts, or you're interacting in Facebook groups, or you're doing YouTube videos on somebody else's channel, or you're doing any of these things, there are some rules, right? I can't just come on and basically read off the feature list to Groundhog and tell you how much it is, give you a discount, and say thanks. That's been awesome. It's been great. Thanks for your time. Like, I can't just do that, because that's not great content. Like, that doesn't exactly help people. Yeah, I might get a sale every now and again, but it's not exactly enlightening. And whatever your product is, whatever your solution, whether it's software, whether it's supplements, whether it's a course, whether you're a YouTube channel, like whether you're any of these things, the golden rule when you're operating in somebody else's territory, right? Because basically what I'm doing right now is building my audience on the back of yours. It's being a leech a little bit, right? And
wait a minute. and you're providing content for me.
Exactly. It's the universal law of reciprocity. I have to, the way that I get value out of this is by getting access to your audience, and the way that you get value is I deliver what I'd like to believe is good content and helpful content, right? So if you're in a Facebook group, you can't just join a Facebook group of, let's say you're a gym owner this time, and you want to get new people to come to your gym. You can't just go into like the gym, the Niagara Falls gyms group, because there is one here, and say, hey, come to my gym. You can't do that. And you'll just get like kicked out of the group, because that doesn't provide value. That's just cold solicitation. What you got to do,
the customers too, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. What you do is people ask questions. people need help. And you, as sort of the quote unquote expert or the knowledgeable person who has the solution, then is able to provide a solution in a non-soliciting way. So let's say someone's like, hey, listen, I'm really struggling to see results at my gym. Let's say that someone asked that question. It's like, well, what do you do? Well, come to my gym instead. You could do that, but what might be better is like, hey, listen, if you're not seeing results at your gym, that might be for a variety of reasons. There could be, you could be focusing on the wrong exercises. You might need to invest in like a personal trainer to help you like tailor your workouts better. There could be something wrong with your diet. Why don't you just give us a little bit more information? I happen to have a lot of experience in this area. Feel free to DM me. Like, just say that. That is a helpful answer. It gets them thinking about, well, maybe there is something wrong. It provides them a next step action in order to think. And even better would be to like have a like blog post or a YouTube video like tailored to that specific question. It's like, if you're not seeing results, try like these 3 steps or something like that. Have a video, have a blog post, have something to directly like answer that question. When I was like starting doing like the Facebook group thing, and which I still do, I spend probably an hour a day, like only basically doing this still, because it's incredibly effective. And just going in and out of Facebook groups, cataloging the questions, and then creating content to answer those specific questions. Like, is it a good idea to like self-host your CRM, right? Because there's lots of other self-hosted CRMs. There's not just ours. And I'm like, hey, listen, I happen to be the founder over at Groundhog, which is a self-hosted CRM. I have no vested interest in whether you choose ours or not, but here's an article that walks you through like the pros and cons, like for any self-hosted CRM, including ours. And then I send them that article, they read it, and they could choose ours. They're more likely to choose ours because they had that nice interaction with us. But it also does it like, it's not gatekeeping. It's not like you have to choose ours in order to get that answer, right? And that's an incredibly effective strategy to naturally sort of growing an audience. Because guess what? Is you might think like, well, that's only a one-to-one interaction. That doesn't, it's not like on a podcast where you're like one-to-many. If you're just doing that, it's just a one-to-one. But lots of other people read through the posts or search through the posts and read the answers to those questions. You could be answering the question of up to like 100 people at any given time. Even if you're only answering the question of one person. And most people are just afraid to ask questions, right? It's like being back in university, or even earlier, just in high school. It's like, any questions? And you have a question in the back of your mind, but you don't want to be the guy that puts your hand up. Right? It's the same thing it's the same thing online. If you just answer a question, you could be answering lots of people's questions. So that is really sort of like the golden rule here. So number one, you gotta define your niche. You gotta define your audience. Number two, you gotta figure out where are they hanging out, and you gotta go hang out where they are. Number three, don't solicit, just provide value, free of charge. Right? Just answer people's questions, provide value. If you have a great story, share your great story. Don't have any sort of expectation in return, because what's going to happen is the universal law of reciprocity is just going to kick in, and you're going to get something in return anyway, right? I see that you have like this roll of inspirational quotes, and I saw that one of them was from Zig Ziglar, who has another quote: "Help enough people get what they want, and you can have what they want, or you can have what you want, rather." And basically that's the golden rule to live by. It's just like, if you help enough people get what they want, you can have what you want. And that's going to manifest itself through the flywheel effect, where you're going to help people, and the people who matter, who are going to be able to get you up the sort of like the next rung of the ladder, are going to notice. And you're going to then be able to have conversations with them. That's then going to move your business, your YouTube channel, your gym, your course site, your membership, whatever further.
Interesting, Adrian. And you talked about, working out who your ideal prospect is so that you can speak to them, finding out where they hang out, and then going and hanging out. And part of that, you talked about going on podcasts. Now, it's a lot easier than hosting a podcast, and you can just, people want guests, as you say. Now, people are going to be thinking to themselves, how long does this process take? If I start turning up on podcasts and hanging out in groups, how long can it take for me to start getting traction?
It's not overnight, I can tell you that much. It probably took 6 months to see any sort of return on the time invested. But that's how long it takes. And you're just going to have to be okay with that. But once it does kick in, it kicks in really fast. So you are very much investing in the future. And it could take shorter, it could take longer, depending on like the frequency of when you do it. I was doing maybe one every 2 to 3 weeks. Like if you can get them like lined up like once a week for forever, I imagine it would go by a lot quicker. But typically, like especially like depending on when you start, and like some podcasters do like seasons, and then they record a bunch, and then they don't record, and then they book everybody out in like 3 months later. So depending on like who you're interacting with, that it could totally swap up the schedule. But for me, I didn't see any sort of like return on the strategy until probably 6 months. But once it started, it didn't stop and it didn't slow down. And I attribute much of our early growth very much to doing this. And now, 3 years later, right, we're growing basically through word of mouth and reputation alone. And that's what happens. Like people listen to podcasts, and then they ask questions on Facebook, and they talk to their friends, and it especially if you niche down to a very specific community, everybody knows each other in those communities, right? And people are going to start asking, hey, listen, what do you use? I'm like, oh, I use this, or I go to this gym, or I use this supplement, right? And here's where you can go find it. And then, if you're in enough places, people just start to see your face over and over and over again. It's like, oh, I know that face. That's recognizable. I implicitly trust this face because I've seen it in so many places, right? They don't even need to listen to the podcast that you've been on. They just need to know that you've been in the community for a while, and that's enough. Right?
100%. Adrian, let's talk about Groundhog and say agencies. And the agencies are working with customers. They're building things on WordPress a lot of the time. And what is the frustration that perhaps Groundhog can fill for them?
So for agencies, a lot of the frustration that they had, especially when working with sort of the traditional tools, HubSpot, Campaign, Keep, Infusionsoft, the biggest frustration with those. You're familiar.
What's it called now? Keep.
Yeah. So the traditional gripe with those tools is the time it takes to replicate results between clients. Like a lot of the agencies that I work with at Groundhog, a lot of them service a very specific niche. And generally those niches have very specific needs that are replicatable between all of them. And for most of the platforms that are out there, you can't just like copy paste an account, or you can't just copy paste a whole email or a whole like marketing campaign, or you can't do that. Or if you can do that, it's an incredibly difficult process. And then there's the issue of like, all right, well, do I sign up for the client account? Does the client sign up for their own account? Do I get a commission? Like, is there a partner program? And it's just a very confusing, and it's not a fun process. And you have to, number one, sell the client on using the software in like the first place. Like if they don't already have like a CRM, or maybe they have one, but it's not the one you want them to be on. And then you have to convince them and sell them to switch so that you can be in your happy place as an agency. And it's just so incredibly convoluted. And then actually like getting set up, a lot of the time you basically just have to like rebuild the same stuff all over again. And then there's the issue of integrating it with WordPress, which basically your only option. If you're using a SaaS platform, is WP Fusion, which Jack Arturo, who's the CEO of that, who's one of the people that I've met on my journey, who's an absolutely fantastic guy. It's not an inexpensive product, and people have to pay for that on top of whatever fees that they're already paying for their CRM, their SaaS-based CRM platform. And basically getting people to sign up or starting the implementation process for CRM marketing automation when you're using SaaS is just not fun, generally, as an agency. And I wanted it to be easier for them. And so what we did for agencies was basically we have this special license that we sell to them. And they can use it. They pay for it up front for like $960 a year, which is incredibly inexpensive compared to our competitors. It's a self-hosted platform, and our overhead is basically in support and maintenance and development. We don't have like any hosting costs, which is what the majority of your cost is when you choose SaaS. Like you're basically paying for hosting. It's a hosting company. We don't have that cost, so we don't charge for it. And they can use that one license for up to 25 of their clients. And then everything in Groundhog is easily replicatable. You can export everything and import it elsewhere. So basically, they can install Groundhog on whatever client. They can export their one client stuff and import it into the new client, change the logos, change the copy a little bit, and Bob's your uncle. You're ready to like send this client off to the races. And you can basically cut down your implementation by a factor of 10. The majority of the implementation time and the time it takes to launch a client is spent in procurement and setup. If you can eliminate those two things and you can cut down that time, it reduces the overhead that you spend on any one client drastically. And so that's what we set out to do. And that's what we have done.
Awesome. Yeah. And so you pay for your annual license, and then you can have 25 clients using it. And then are they able to, so the thing that I hate about a lot of SaaS products is they get you in at a low price, they get their hooks in, you're using it, and then every time you're trying to grow and upscale, they're digging into you more and more, and it feels like you're getting ripped off a little bit.
We call that the success tax. It's a tax on your growth. And it is very common. Pretty much everybody does it as a self-hosted solution, because Groundhog is literally a plugin that you install on your WordPress website. It does a couple things. Number one, it puts you in complete control over your data. So no one else has access to that information except you. And because it's self-hosted, if you, for whatever, it's a choice between paying your license fees or paying payroll, you can choose payroll. And your stuff doesn't get locked down, like it doesn't get deactivated. It still continues to work. And most importantly, there is no success tax. So pretty much everything in Groundhog, there's no limits. It's unrestricted. You pay for a license for access to our premium goodies and stuff, and for support. And if you have 1,000 contacts or 100,000 contacts, doesn't matter to me. I don't pay for the hosting, right? I don't have any overhead related to how many people you have on your list. And I mean, that's part of the excuse that SaaS companies use to charge the success tax. Is if you have more people, it's more overhead for us. The overhead in the number of people that you have versus if you have 100,000 people or 10,000 people, the scale in overhead does not match the amount that they charge. But that's the excuse that they use, right? So I don't even have the benefit of that excuse. So we just charge, it's a flat rate. So an agency pays $960 a year. They can use it for up to 25 of their clients, and they can use it for up to 25 of the clients. We'll charge them more if they need more than 25 people. But as long as it's only up to 25, it's 960. And we're speaking a lot about agencies, but we service the WordPress small business community at large. E-commerce stores, brick and mortar stores, consultants, speakers, course creators, podcasters, you name it, we service them. Like I said, when you pick your your one target audience, right, you want to make sure that they encompass or branch out into other audiences. And so we service probably only 30% of our audience is actually agencies, and the remainder is sort of your smattering of every sort of kind of small business that there is.
Excellent. And I think you've got a really good, unique selling proposition compared to what just about everyone else is offering by, avoiding that success tax, because that's one thing that hurts me. And just one thing I wanted to quickly cover before we wrap up the CRM is, do you want to quickly just tell us what that is?
Absolutely, yeah. We should probably do that. Like, if you're very new to the sort of like the small business and entrepreneurial world, this all these acronyms might seem a little bit daunting. So CRM is a customer relation management system. And basically, it's the list. It's your customer list, and that's where you keep it. Some people keep it in an Excel file. I wouldn't recommend that. Some people have it in like Google Contacts, and some people have it. Literally, I went to my partner's dad's birthday was last year in December, and I went to pick up his cake. We got like a beautifully custom cake done for him. It was awesome. And I went up to the counter, and she's like, "Okay, what's your name and your email address?" And I gave it to her. And she opens this giant book. It's like probably this thick. It's like if you're listening to audio only, it must have been 7 inches thick, this book. And she opens it like to the middle and just starts flipping through pages and reading like this chicken scratch writing. Like looking for the order. I'm just thinking to myself, oh, so some people have it in a book, right? And that's their list, right? And so digital forms of CRMs like mine, like HubSpot, like Salesforce, like ActiveCampaign, most of them incorporate something called marketing automation. And that's the part that makes your list, like the data that you have on people, actionable. And that's the important part, right? Because you can have a list of email addresses or a list of names or a list of phone numbers, whatever, but if you can't do anything with it, then it's not exactly helpful to your business or valuable. So the marketing automation component is what allows you to, let's say, I want to sort the people in my CRM, and I want to choose everyone who's like a one-time buyer and hasn't purchased more than once. I want to send an email to these one-time buyers to try and get them to purchase again. And I'm going to give them 15% off incentive in order to do that. And that's something that having a tool like Groundhog is going to enable you to do. So you load up all your customers in your CRM and they can get in there. You can enter them manually. You can have a form on your website. You can integrate it with your e-commerce store, and then contacts who buy stuff or people who buy stuff automatically get entered into the CRM. And then you can put them into things like funnels, which will send them like drip emails over time. So after they purchase a product, you can send them an email 7 days later. It's like, hey, listen, did you enjoy the product? Maybe if you did, maybe consider leaving a review, which we do with ours. Like 7 days after someone buys, we send them an email. Hey, listen, we noticed that you got started and you installed it, and that's all great and all. Would you mind giving us a 5-star review? And if they click 1 or 2 stars and they didn't have a great experience, do we send them to the review page? No, we automatically send them to like our triage page where they can book a meeting with the success person so we can solve their problem for them if they're having one.
All automated.
All automated, right? And so there's no, like, you can set up these systems and it's incredibly effective. Now, the one caveat, because I don't want to just like sit here and tell you that CRM and marketing automation is the silver bullet to business growth. It isn't. I wish I could say that, and I wish it was. I'd probably make a lot more money. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to give you actionable steps to growth. So CRM marketing automation, especially the marketing automation point, works. It basically is an amplifier of what you're already doing. And you know, people say, as a metaphor, people say that money is the root of all evil, or that money changes people. And I don't think that's actually true. I think money only amplifies the kind of person you already are, right? If you're an incredibly generous person and you fall into a bunch of money, you're probably going to be even more generous, right? If you're not, or if you tend to hoard or save, you're probably going to tend to continue to do that as your sort of bank account balance grows. And marketing automation is kind of to businesses what money is to people. The more that you're doing, right? Marketing automation is just going to enable you to do more and to reach more people and to action on certain things and to convert more people and to convince more people to use your product. But if you don't have everybody on your list, having marketing automation isn't really going to do a whole lot for you because you're not doing anything, right? Having marketing automation doesn't mean that there's automatically going to be 10,000 people on your email list, right? So that's why you have to have it on the back end, and you have to enable it to grow organically through the process that I described in the first half of this show. So at the end of this show, you get to do your bit, right? Like if you're doing a podcast, you get to do your 1 minute, your 30-second, your 45-second bit, which I'm going to do probably at the end of this. And you're going to be like, well, you're going to ask, hey, Adrian, where can people go to find out more about you? And I'm going to tell them where to go. And then they're going to go there. And then what are you going to have there? You're going to have some way for them to take some sort of action. It can be a forum where you ask for their email address. It can be to watch a YouTube video. It can be to read a blog post, whatever. But what you want to have is some sort of method to capture their information, right? Because that is what actually makes a business valuable, right? You can have the greatest product in the world, but if you don't have anybody to sell it to, then it's not that great. Right? So you have to start building your list. So you have to have that CRM component there to get people's data so that you can leverage it later. And that's what CRM marketing automation is really all about. And then once you start to build a list, let's say you have like 100 people, then you can use marketing automation. You can send them an email like, hey, listen, here's 10% off, go buy the product. Or here's this really helpful blog post that I wrote, which then gives them 50% off to go buy the product, right? There's lots of ways that you can sort of build this overarching customer journey to lead someone from listening to my 30-second bit at the end of a podcast to being a customer of our company. Whew. All right, so that's a lot of information.
Awesome. Adrian Tobey. Yeah. No, and if people out there are thinking about, I need to get basically automated, and you need to have a way of dealing with all your leads. And it's better to do it early so that you've got the systems all and you grow with the solution, especially when you've got a solution that basically allows you to scale. So that's Groundhog. I'm going to check that out. That sounds pretty cool. Thanks for coming on, Adrian Tobey.
I had a great time. I hope people learned something.
Well, I did. And if I did, I'm sure some other people did.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for listening. And you're going to see me very soon on another episode. Thanks, Adrian.
Have a good one.